Somewhat rainy Sunday. Welcome. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to discuss a whole series of fundamental challenges around the Atlantic Basin. And today, we have an opportunity to continue that conversation by talking about investment in Africa, human capital, and thinking through the unexpected. And I'm very, very pleased that we will be able to have our first session moderated by my GMF Brussels colleague, Guillaume Xavier-Bender. So Guillaume, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I'd like to welcome our panelists on stage for this wonderful session on mobilizing investments in Africa, please. We'll start with a short video, and then we'll dive right into it.
Called the growth continent for the 21st century, Africa offers immense economic opportunities. While some African countries have done a lot to alleviate poverty, the potential of the continent has yet to be fully unleashed. To do so, African nations need adequate investments, strong political will, and sound institutions. Cooperation between the public and private sectors to fill the infrastructure, governance, and skills gaps will be critical. African investors face significant challenges to match their needs with foreign requirements and perceptions of risk. By changing the perspective of investors from a doing good type of investment, driven by aid and donations, to a doing good business type of investment, driven by decent returns, Africans are beginning to attract new types of partners. What initiatives can develop the skills needed for sustainable and inclusive economic progress in Africa? What role should private equity play in unleashing Africa's potential? What lessons can be learned from Latin America and Asia? How can Atlantic partners contribute to infrastructure development on the continent?
The thread of Atlantic Dialogues 2015 was prosperity and security. Security and prosperity. We've heard about it for the past 2 days, and we've heard some of the keywords come back during Friday's discussions and yesterday's discussions again. Investing, scaling up. What do we do if we don't actually create the instruments for better growth? Skills, talent, all of these things create an environment to doing business. And this is what we'll try to do today, and engaging you all in the room as well with our wonderful panelists, which is to look at how can Africa mobilize investments from within and also encourage investments from abroad. I'd like to start this conversation actually with you. And if you could take out your devices, we are going to do a word cloud. Simple question. It's the same that we're all going to ask ourselves this morning. Which word comes to your mind when thinking about how to mobilize investments for Africa? And you can start it now. Starting to be concerned that China would be the first word. You still have 7 seconds. Stability, China, youth, corruption, public-private partnerships, grassroots. Let's all keep these words in mind as we're going to have our conversation this morning. I'm going to start with Yacine Fall, who's a resident representative of the African Development Bank in Morocco. Yacine, any of these words actually that you want to react to?
China. And which is an interesting word because China is a kind of myth, I would say, as much as a reality. But I'm a little bit sad that I haven't seen the word financial services, financing, long-term investment, because definitely the transformation of the continent, and I can see the word infrastructure. What it badly requires is long-term investment, long-term resources, as well as the promotion, the development of an SME structure also requires long-term investment and financial services to establish a strong, productive sector.
What is the African Development Bank doing specifically on this?
So basically, this is part of one of our main objectives, and the bank has developed a number of initiatives. I think most of the people have heard that infrastructure is one of the main focus, because to develop a productive sector, we need basic services, electricity, roads, IT, backbones, etc. And but to develop those infrastructure, we need financial markets, financial services. Less than 20% of African households have access to financial services. Entrepreneurs do not have the capability to develop their business, because they are generally family-based business, and they don't have additional long-term investment to develop, and the mortality rate of African enterprises, and specifically SMEs, is terrible. And therefore, the bank has developed high-level initiatives and lower level. And I can give you an example. We have developed an initiative that is called Making Finance Work for Africa, to develop exactly what you mentioned. Capabilities, legal and regulatory framework, institutional framework, and cooperation. The bank has also most recently developed an important initiative that is called Africa 50. It is a platform, a new vehicle, taking lessons on the experience that the bank has accumulated over the years, noting that one of the main reasons why the infrastructure gap is so important in Africa is that we lack the projects that are promoted, infrastructure projects that are promoted, are not properly developed. The development period is very long when the need is more short-term. And to combine the project development platform with a project finance platform to attract foreign international investors.
Attracting investors, accessing markets, accessing finances. I'd like now to turn to Ezana Bocresion. You're a senior fellow at the OCP Policy Center, but you told me also you're a merchant, you're a banker, you're an agribusiness. Private equity, is that finance, that instrument, financial instruments that should be more accessible within Africa to Africans?
I think it should be more accessible, but it isn't. And that's actually that's the chasm we need to bridge. And it's not available for a variety of reasons. The main reason is that I think there's a misperception of the risk involved. So we need to really address why foreign institutional investors who deploy private equity capital see Africa as more risky than it is. You know, I remember having a discussion with an institutional investor about 18 months ago who told me that he felt more comfortable investing in Argentina than he did in Zambia. So when you have that type of view of investing in Africa, in agribusiness, when Zambia has proven that it will protect investor rights and has the right ecosystem for investing in agribusiness in the region, somebody needs to help bridge that gap. So until we do, I think this misperception will persist. But the best way to really bring capital to Africa is definitely through private equity. It's not, when you think about the sources of capital that are available to the businesses that are going to drive growth on the continent, the continent itself is driven by credit. It's not an equity culture. So I think you need to start educating on both sides of the coin, including the companies on the ground, of how to deal with private equity investors and what they need. Most private equity investors around the world need to understand what they're getting into. So it's about record keeping, providing good financial information. It's about talking about strategy and understanding your markets, and helping the investor understand that there will be a return at the end of the investment period. The other thing that we have to do, or the continent has to do, is really more on the government side, is the governments have to put in laws that give investors comfort that their investments are going to be protected, and this view of the political risk or the inability of the court systems to fairly address the interests of the investors has to be addressed. And that is, there are certain countries that have put in systems and not systems so much, but laws that protect investors. They've done well. Ethiopia is one of them, Zambia is another, but the perception still lies behind that. And once you address the legal framework, the last thing that I think you really need to address is partners on the ground. Private equity at the end of the day is a local business. Foreign institutional investors that are going to come in and invest in Africa need to know that they can work with local partners who know how to get things done, but also espouse their values. And the question is, how do you find those? The only way to find those is if you have local relationships. So private equity or institutional investors around the world are going to have to spend time and investigate and invest in local relationships, and that takes time. I think we'll get there, but these are the different things we're going to have to address.
But is there a conundrum or a conflict? You have to have local partners, but you need also to build that local capacity at the government's level in order to attract these investments.
I don't think it's a conundrum, really, because you'll always need a local partner to help you execute, because those are the people that know how to maneuver or operate on the ground. But the governance systems, for example, you're going to have to bring those, and you're going to have to impose those. You're going to have to educate your local partner on why it is that way. I mean, Ethiopia has gone a long way, for example, in terms of what they require of the portfolio company and the managements of the portfolio companies. So I think there needs to be an education for both parties, but when the party that needs the capital really understands what they need to do in order to move forward, I don't think that's as much of the issue as the other side of the equation.
Tokunboh Ishmael, you are the managing director of Alitheia Capital. You are highly invested in private equity. What do you think of what Ezana just said?
Well, I agree with a number of things that have been said already. I just want to highlight a couple of challenges. Like you said, I am a private equity fund manager, which means I invest in businesses. And for us as a firm, we particularly invest in businesses that can help us reach certain objectives. So financial inclusion, we've invested in financial services firms. Energy inclusion, we've looked at investments in off-grid technologies, again, trying to drive inclusion. And more recently, we're looking at gender inclusion in terms of investing in female entrepreneurs and changing the narrative away from the fact that female entrepreneurs are not just women who sell peanuts by the roadside, but are actually growing businesses. The challenges that we see are that when we begin to talk about mobilizing investments into Africa, and we're going out and looking for these international investors, charity begins at home. And I'm not saying that what we do is charity, but if we don't have domestic investors, domestic asset holders, the insurance companies, the pension funds themselves investing in the asset class, you know, really should we be going out there and waving a flag? What is it that is stopping the domestic asset holders from investing? And that's where I agree, like, there needs to be education in terms of the regulatory environment, in terms of the potential investment space that's there, but also with the entrepreneurs that we work with, in terms of them understanding the private equity instrument. And if I can just say, many of the challenges that we face, we see many opportunities to make 2 times, 3 times your money. One of my colleagues in the space says he doesn't get out of bed unless he can see an investment that's going to give him 5 times his money. And those opportunities do exist. However, the entrepreneurs themselves are not necessarily ready for equity. So we need to begin to think of a broader basket of instruments that service the needs of the businesses that are on the ground and helps investors meet their objectives. So whether that's mezzanine financing, whether that's some kind of royalty share financing, but definitely moving away from a pure debt credit culture, because that's not helping the businesses themselves. But also with the entrepreneurs, beyond educating about instruments, it's also educating about what's important for investors to see. Your governance structures, what does that mean? How do you access markets? How do you build up your teams? It's not just a one-man shop. We're not just talking about, you know, Fred and his mate. We're talking about teams that can scale businesses. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And that education is not just in terms of being prescriptive, but providing the human capacity development that's required at that level.
You'd like to redesign?
What's actually interesting is I think the private equity model that we have seen traditionally in the first world, be it in the United States or in Europe, is actually not going to work in Africa. And the main reason for that is for the reasons that were just articulated. Whoever is going to come in is going to need to work to build capacity and management skill sets from the outset. This is not something that you can outsource to a consulting firm to do for you. You're actually going to have to do it yourself. Private equity, or what we traditionally call private equity, is actually going to morph. It's going to have to pivot. And it's going to have to work up and down the capital structure and not just purely play downstairs in the equity section, but you're going to have to be flexible in how you work with your target potential investment targets. But you're going to have to get in there and help them build teams, help them build the skill sets, help them put in the systems and interpret the systems and actually help them manage the business, because otherwise the systems or I wouldn't call it education levels, but it's the knowledge base is way off the mark to satisfy the needs of existing institutional investors. And that's actually part of the risk chasm you have to close.
Is that for the whole of Africa, or are they specific countries where the situation is actually a little different?
Some countries are more developed than others. Nigeria, obviously, with the experience base that's there in terms of private equity, is quite large, and it's a hub for significant amounts of capital. That said, across the continent, last year, large private equity funds raised over $4 billion, and we were, bringing out the party shakers and dancing about that. But actually, if you look at a fund in the US, that's one fund that would raise $4 billion. So it's not a lot of money that's come in. But Nigeria, South Africa takes the bulk of a lot of that money that comes in, because it's more developed in terms of its regulatory environment, in terms of providing investors confidence, in terms of showing what has already been done. But I'd also like to touch upon another reason why private equity may be different on the continent, even if these markets are developed, the hubs, whether it's Nigeria, Johannesburg, or Kenya. And that is the fact that actually what we're doing in Nigeria at the moment is not really private equity per se. I mean, in the US, in the UK, people are looking for management buyouts, leverage buyouts. They're looking at how they can do financial engineering with the balance sheet. We are building businesses. So just like has been articulated, we're putting in money and we're rolling up our sleeves and we're working alongside the management. So I always say to people, we don't just bring financial capital, we also bring human capital. We're helping you put in your governance structures. And it's hard sometimes for investors that are coming in from other jurisdictions to understand that level of involvement is required. Right. And so that's a bit of a shift. And that's why it's important that locally we build up the industry ourselves doing these things before we start shouting for all these other monies to come.
We'll have a chance to talk about human capital and making the link as well with the following session. Yacine, you wanted to react as well.
Yes, there is definitely a cultural divide also to acknowledge that usually in Francophone countries, they are way behind Anglophone countries. You can see that the countries that were quoted were mostly Anglophone countries. But there is now definitely a change. Progress in Francophone countries, and Morocco is a very good example. The bank has been supporting Morocco in the last 10 years in developing their financial sectors, and I would say overhauling and progressively we can see the development of financial culture. Within the last 10 years, the bancarization rate moved from 30% to 60%. In Morocco and growing. And also, I would like to point out, apart from what has been said already, the importance of cooperation between financial actors across the continent. And also, it's important that investors from one part of the continent trust and invest in other parts of the continent. It's absolutely critical, and learn from each other. And that's what, with the different initiatives the bank is hosting, we are trying first to create a network to foster collaboration, exchange of information. The bank is sponsoring the development of an African bond market index and sharing of financial information across the continent.
You're absolutely right to mention that intra-African investment pattern. I think it's grown by more than 30% in the last 7 or 8 years, that intra-Africa investment, so not only relying on foreign direct investments. I'd like to turn to you all in the crowd if there are any questions. Up in the front, please. If we could.
I think that's extremely important, again, because we as Africans, we understand...
Could you introduce yourself,
sorry,
please?
My name is Korede Adenao. I work with Standard Chartered Bank. I'm Nigerian. So we as Africans understand our pain, we understand our needs, and we understand the urgency with which we want to develop more than anybody else outside, you know, and anybody else outside would like to also see what have you guys done for yourselves, you know. Yeah. And so in terms of understanding your pain, understanding your needs and the urgency, you can see, like you rightly said, our local entrepreneurs. I'd give an example of Dangote Cement, you know, who understands the needs of Africa in terms of the need to ramp up infrastructure, and is virtually opening up one cement plant every month. I'm yet to see any other cement producer that can actually ramp up, you know, and set up a cement plant in different countries almost every month within Africa. And that's because he understands the needs, he understands the urgency. That is one. But how could that have been possible, again, is because African governments also have to build the institutions and create that environment. Many of the countries in the continent have decided that, look, you need to stabilize the financial systems and put the enabling environment in place. And so in the case of Nigeria, Nigeria ramped up the capital, required from banks. And so the typical bank that was capitalized with $20 million that could not do a typical oil transaction and relied on BNP Paribas or foreign institutions to come and invest in the oil sector, suddenly the banks were doing it. And because of that, because one country ramped up the regulatory requirements, CIMAC has also increased. Ghana, the CIMAC region has increased. Ghana has also decided to increase because they have seen the multiplier effects, that strengthening those financial institutions can have, in giving even the entrepreneurs the boldness, to go out there and do things across the continent. The financing and the investment is within Africa. We should actually collaborate together, trust ourselves and actually invest within our continent, within our countries, and cross-border within Africa, and we will get the desired results. And then, look at the South Africans, MTN. MTN had been in existence for about 10 years before they started buying licenses in West Africa. And boom, that changed completely the scope and the face of MTN. ShopRite. So many South African companies have gone north, many Nigerian companies have gone south, East African countries, companies are within the EAC, expanding to Burundi, Rwanda. Moroccan companies, look at the big 4 Moroccan banks, doing things all over Africa. The big 4 South African banks. So we got to do it ourselves first before they come to also help us to actually leverage on that. Thank you.
I think you're echoing what someone said yesterday. This is Africa's moment.
What's actually interesting is that's from the existing corporate perspective. And the reason those companies are successful, you're right, is because they understand the needs, but they also know how to execute on the ground. So, for example, why was Vodacom, Safaricom successful? Because they understood that in order to be successful, you couldn't pursue the same paradigm you have in Europe or in the US, where you charge for phone time by the minute, you do it by the second. They also developed the ability for mobile payments. So you're adapting to your local environment. But we also have sovereign capital wealth on the continent that needs to be taken from the countries that have it, and it can be invested in other countries that need it where the opportunities are. But again, here, those same countries have different legal frameworks, and they need to feel comfortable with the rules and regulations of the countries they're going to and the management talent. So we actually have those same challenges going across borders as the people coming in from outside. So there are lots of things that one of the challenges is there are many things that need to be worked on concurrently. But the most important thing that we need is critical mass of capital. So I think the question is, how can we get that critical mass? And who are the intermediaries that can help that, make that happen or bridge that gap?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
If I can just respond to
Please
that
do.
about the critical mass of capital, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think, yes, again, that's at corporate levels. But we also have to think about where does that critical mass of capital, where is it needed most, and the different stages where it needs to go. Because what's happening at the moment is the critical mass of the 4 billion odd that I mentioned earlier is going into large established companies already. But we talk about the missing middle where they are not finding financing because there are lots of programs that exist for micro enterprises, lots of large corporate financing. But that missing middle, that sort of small growing business, the engines of growth, as we like to call them, there's a lot of capital that's not going into them because nobody's really helping them interpret the risk. There's a lot of talent development that's required. People need to roll up their sleeves. And the local investors are not looking at them because they see it as a risk, just like the outside. If I can just very quickly say, if we look at other countries like Germany, the UK, the US, that stage of capital, the governments took a leap of faith and placed money for fund managers to invest in that stage of capital because they knew that they had to show the confidence that these are indeed the engines of growth. Until we do that in the individual countries, in Africa, we're still going to be having this narrative that doesn't work.
Yes, and you also want to track, then I have 4 questions on this side.
Yeah.
Please, you first.
There's definitely a need to strengthen the institutional framework, and it's ongoing. But institutional investment is one thing. Mobilizing private investment through instruments that would definitely mitigate the risk perception, such as mutual funds, etc., has to be fostered also as well. And also the financial culture, the financial education has to be strengthened through harmonization. For example, the bank has been supporting exchanges and stock exchange games between Moroccan business schools and West Africa business school. And we saw that there is definitely emerging talent. We were talking about talents earlier, interest. And of course, there is a difference in the structure of the institutional framework in West Africa, which is moving forward very fast. And, but there is an interest in really investing in our economies. And another point I would like to make is when you look at the bond issues they are all oversubscribed. So definitely there is appetite for such investment. Most of our banks' cash flows are superior to the percentage in other regions. So that means that there is definitely capital that has to be enabled to walk around.
Question right here.
My name is Aubrey Ruby. I've been a longtime investor, or a longtime advisor to investors investing in sub-Saharan Africa. My question is to Tokunboh, how have you seen the fundraising environment change? And are we at a tipping point of greater understanding in the US and EU to the opportunities in Africa? How do you see it as a fund manager going out there? The second question is to Yacine. I think all of us believe that Africa 50 is an important initiative at the AFDB. The question, of course, comes to execution. How will it be implemented and executed differently? Are you thinking of very radical kind of approaches, maybe a spin-out company similar to IFC Asset Management, or can you speak a little bit to implementation? Thank you.
We'll answer the questions. If you put the microphone right in front of you.
Good morning. I'm Marcela Donadillo. I'm work for the Latin America Security and Defense Network, and I am from Argentina. And I'm following your comment. And I think that we could share 2 positive experiences from Latin America. The first one is that Latin American countries are not perceived as a whole, as it happens in Africa. You know, we speak on Africa, Africa, Africa. You have been saying that during all the conferences. And the second one is the perception of conflict that investors have. And I think that's an important issue, to work on confidence-building measures between countries, to work on transparency on defense issues, on security issues, to work on these internal conflicts, because I think that's the perception that investors have. And in the case of Latin America, it has been a very important process during the past 2 decades. The notion that countries are not going to war, that internal conflict can be managed, where we are seeing now the case of Colombia. And in the case when internal conflicts cannot be managed, as in the case of Central America, they are suffering the lack of investment. So I think that we should share more between these regions.
Thank you. Could you pass the microphone to the third person on your right, please? We'll take that last question, and then I'll go back to the panel.
I'm the third person. Thank you.
Yes, you are.
Now, I just wanted to make a quick comment about this missing middle. My name is Didier Akwete. I'm executive president of a search firm called AfriCsearch. 90% of the private sector in Africa is made of SMEs. Mm-hmm. Even sometimes very small companies with 1 or 2 people. These SMEs generate only 30% of the African wealth, compared with other countries where they generate 60%. they provide 45% of the jobs in Africa. The question is, how the mama who sells a peanut on the road has been selling the same peanuts, the same place for 20 years? How the gentleman who decided to produce coconut juice since 10 years has been producing the same volume of coconuts? That's the question. How do we grow those champions? Dangote, MTN, it's only 10% of the economy. So this 90%, how do we make sure they become the next champion? And we've taken an initiative called African Regional Champions. The idea is to make sure all those small companies, you link them together. You put some money, right skills, and grow them. So in 5 years' time, the mama who's doing the peanuts, she becomes a peanuts dealer. You see, so we build a whole value chain around those SMEs to make sure those are the ones who can produce growth and employment. It's not a question of money, and Yacine just said it. The bonds, oversubscribed. When you look for money in Africa right now for investment, you find it from China, from Malaysia, you name it, Middle East. So it's not a question of money, it's a question of what strategy do we put in place to grow those local champions, and the second thing, to attract those young. Let me tell you, as a leading firm in recruitment in Africa, most of the young people that graduated in Africa and overseas, they don't want to work for those small companies. They want to go to MTN, EcoBank, whatever. So as long as we don't make sure those small companies have the right governance, the right capacity to attract talents, the job issue as well won't be solved. It's not a question of just, making growth. Ivory Coast, we were talking about Ivory Coast, 10% growth the last 5 years. In terms of impact on employment, we haven't seen it. So public investment is good, but we have to measure the impact. And for me, according to me, the impact is how many champions have you grown for 5 or 10 years, and how many jobs you have created. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can respond to that one first before I go to
Please do.
Reese. You're very right. It's not just a question of money, and I said that before. You have to roll up your sleeves, you have to get involved. But actually, I also do believe it is a big question of money, because some of those small firms, you're running one shop. Even if you have the resources to run that one shop and you're making money in one shop, somewhere like Lagos, you can't rent a second shop. It's too expensive for you. You still need money to do certain things, but you need the human capacity and talent that guides you on how to scale, to begin to roll out and have a chain of shops. So I fully agree with you about that. I fully agree that we need to develop the value chains. And when you say that the young professional doesn't want to go and work with the small companies, they want to work with the MTN, that's because the small company can't compete with them on salary. Let's just come down to brass tacks. So again, money does play a role. And oftentimes, I hear this that, it's not just about money, it's about capacity development. And then you try and bring capacity development in the way that you've external consultants to some small business. The external consultant comes, does something nice that they put on the shelf, and they go. You need people that can live in those companies. You need to pay for those people. So I fully agree it's about human development and talent and everything. These companies also need money to be able to pay for those. They need to be able to have the right governance structures. Some of the things that we've tried to do is talk about having shared services amongst a group of small businesses so that you don't have to have a full-time HR, full-time marketing, but you can share between those. So I fully agree. You're right, money, increasingly it's easier to raise money. That's why, when I started in private equity in Nigeria a while back now, it was it was only the local banks that we could go to because there was a regulation that stipulated that they had to provide some money for SMEs. And even though there were at the time, 80 local banks, only 2 were bold enough, Standard Chartered being one of them, to take the step to make investments. So there is a change in terms of the amount of money. But what I'm seeing now, Aubrey, as we go out, is that because there's certain poster funds that are raising $1 billion and it's now a big thing, everybody wants to be in the same $1 billion fund. It's the same way that all the banks want to invest in Dangote, right? But nobody else wants to invest in the small local industry that's actually, they're also producing the same things, you know, fast-moving consumer goods. We can't all just jump like lemmings into the same investments. We need to see more diversity. We're beginning to see that beyond development finance institutions being the sole investors in Africa. We're now seeing US companies, pension funds investing, but everybody's investing in the same things. So,
Ezana, you've had your hand 4 times up.
I actually believe that the Latin American experience is very relevant. If you look at what happened in Latin America, you didn't have regional champions. You know, in Brazil, I worked in the chemical industry, worked in the chemical industry in Latin America beginning in the early 90s. It was a scattershot of players with no structure, no cohesion. And, you know, Copesul had God knows how many shareholders. Out of that, by 2005, everything had been restructured. So as a result of all the privatizations that took place, you had the restructuring of corporate Brazil. And you had the institutionalization of those businesses formally, and you had professional managements that came in, and then you had the creation of Braskem, for example, in Brazil, which is now definitely a regional, definitely a regional champion, potentially a global champion. So that can happen. But investors follow where the opportunities are, and they're not going to spend excess time and energy on doing a lot of the things that they expect to be done for them, or things that already need to be in place. The legal frameworks really do need to be established. The systems need to be there. This is what I call common good work. And that's where our countries in Africa really need to focus, so that you can take the perceived risk off the table. And the capital will come once you have that. But it's not, at this stage of where we are, where a lot of the private equity firms actually have to roll up their sleeves, that's going to be local capital. Do you agree?
Yes, you want to say something? And maybe think also about that question of how do you alleviate the risk already to attract those investments from coming? Is there something that African countries are not doing well? Are they using the wrong words? Is it just a question of infrastructure? Could we?
Definitely, just to address the question about the parallel with Latin America. That's why it's important that investment in Africa should be led by African investors, and foreign investment should just complement those investors, because the needs are long term, the risks are there, we cannot deny them, because we have the markets are not mature, the macroeconomic framework is not completely stabilized, and when the going gets tough, we have to make sure that if all the foreign investment flies out, the African investment is still there long term. And we have to be conscious of the link between all the elements that we have just alluded to, from basic strong infrastructure to make basic services available, institutional framework, regulatory, in one word, if I have to use one word, governance. Governance is the best way, and with all the different elements that can constitute what we call governance, is absolutely fundamental to address this risk and the perception of risk internally in the continent and from foreign investment. And another element that is quite important is building capacity from developing a culture of saving, a culture of partnerships and being an openness to other investors. More the lady that has that is selling peanuts and has developed her own business would rather see a business die when she cannot operate it anymore than having strangers, so to speak, join her company. She wants her company to own a company and have children. And if her children are not interested and want to get into Citibank, the business will die. I said it already. And lastly, there is a need also for institutional players to really bring on board individual private investors. They should, and definitely it's not really the case, because banks are to a certain scale in Africa, are even more risk adverse than private parties. So and if I may address the question quickly, on Africa 50. Actually, Africa 50 has been now registered in Casablanca under the Casablanca Finance City. And basically, we have made an initial closing. The structure of Africa 50's capital is based on 3 categories. And in that extent, it's an innovation. We have African states who should be, who are the first cluster of investors. We have about 30 countries that were able to contribute to the first closing. And we've reached a shareholding of about more than $800 million. Now, the bank is expecting, with, of course, the current shareholders, to go for a second closing, bringing on board financial institutions within the continent and probably outside. Deliberately, the state's shareholding will be limited to African countries, although there has been expressions of interest from other states. And the third, and later on, the capital structure will be open to private investors wherever they come from. And in parallel to that, we are building, Africa 50 is building a pipeline for project development and project finance. And it's all ready, but obviously the administrative and also the fundraising process has expanded a little bit more than the anticipated time frame. But projects are on the table. There are people looking at them, and I'm sure that next year, 2016, will be really the year for where Africa 50 will take up.
Thank you, Yacine. There are a lot of you who want to come in the room, so we're going to start here, and then I've noted all of you, don't worry.
I wanted to jump in, Helga Flores with the Inter-American Development Bank Group, and I wanted to jump in exactly with the discussion of the SMEs in Latin America. Yes, Latin America, similarly, with more than 90% of the businesses are SMEs. Most of them, they're family business. They don't survive to the 3rd generation. And the financing gap, at least for Latin America, is $250 billion. So yes, we know the financing gap is there because banks cannot assess the risk of that woman selling peanuts on the road. What we are seeing in Latin America is that traditional bank will either change the way they do business or will go out of business because technology and big data are changing that. And here's what I wanted to know, how do you perceive that? Crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, fintechs, and new actors like Alibaba now financing, being the biggest financer of SMEs now. How do you see that? Because I think this is our greatest chance with technology and big data to really be able to deliver the finance needing for those SMEs to grow. We are seeing that's a great opportunity. It's not only for these new actors, but really to change the way the banks are doing the business and assessing that risk.
Thank you. Question. We'll take a few comments and questions, and then we'll get back to that. Please, up front.
Thank you very much. Just wanted maybe to...
Please introduce yourself, too.
I'm Aminata Touré, Senegal. just wanted maybe to sort of think about what kind of investment do we want to have. My countryman work on the board, and I very much agree with what he said. It's not like Africa didn't see investment in the past. We saw lot of money coming in. So for what result? I think we need to really ask ourselves that question. We found ourselves paying debt for the past 20 years. We are talking about bringing productive investment in Africa. I appreciated the case of Nigeria, which is the hub. But if you look at Cape Verde, which is 1,000 times smaller than Nigeria, it's displaying better human development result. So we have to combine both. I think we have to look into what kind of investment do we want to attract. Do we want investment that destroy the environment? Do we want investment that split our communities? We know the case of the oil in Nigeria. What did we get out of it? So it's about time that Africa, that is the last frontier in terms of investment. The opportunities you find there, you will find them nowhere. But we don't want investment the way we had it in the past. So we are looking up to you, the new finance expert of our continent, to sort of bring the investment that would bring real prosperity to our people. So we cannot be talking about equity fund the way we talk about them in the past. I'm myself an economist, but it has failed. So what new kind of investment do we want to see? In Senegal, we had to pass a law because we do have very angry national wealthy people who are saying, look, we are seeing China coming in, we are seeing Japan, they're having all the investment locally, so how about us? So we enacted a law saying that if you come in with your money, you have to make sure that you build a partnership with a local private investor, up to 10%, 20%, depending on the business. So this is the new thinking that we are looking up to our young folks and even to everybody. So the investment that will come in Africa will be environment friendly, will produce share wealth to our people, and will increase our standard of living. So that requires rethinking financing altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, on the right. I know you want to react. We'll have time to react. Don't worry about it. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. Is it working? Can you hear me?
It is.
Yes. Well, good morning again. Assia bin Salih Alawi, Ambassador at Large of His Majesty, the King of Morocco. So building on what just Yacine has said previously, and other speakers as well, and especially on the conviction of His Majesty that to progress, Africa must trust Africa, I would like to hear from the panel, all of you, all the three, but perhaps especially Yacine, who might have the right proportions and details. I would like to hear what is the concrete proportion of African investment now in Africa, globally, regionally, and perhaps sub-regionally. If you could give us some figures, because this would put, you know, what we are talking about. And my second question is about the prospect. You have been talking about the toolkits or measures or instruments to improve this investment. What is the real potential, and what are the prospects to improve those rates, which, to my mind, I don't have the precise figures, but they are not that high, and in which sectors, and if you can have a sort of time frame as well.
Tokunboh, you have 2 minutes to react, and then I'll go to Yacine.
Okay,
then back to the
first of
room.
all take that question. Actually, it's happening already. We invested in the first and largest mobile payments company in Nigeria, which is now beginning to see how it can use the mobile phone to issue credits. We also have companies like Conga, which is what we call the Amazon of Nigeria, which has aggregated all these small businesses, providing a storefront, and it's also issuing credit. So there's a lot that's happening, and thank you for bringing that up. FinTech is doing a lot in terms of aggregating, like you mentioned, cooperatives to be able to sell their wares. In terms of responding to what you said, that's precisely why I said at the beginning that we need our own money to catalyze the money that comes in. because our own money it's not just about providing money for the small and growing businesses or providing money towards infrastructure. It's also about seeding money to fund managers so that we can grow our own fund managers. Because part of what has happened is that money is coming in and it's going out as these fund managers leave. And if you have money, only foreign money coming in, of course, when they make their returns, they're going to take it out. If we want money to remain in the country, we have to invest our own money. And when we see these businessmen, investors now saying, "Oh, we would like to be part of it," they needed to be part of it from the beginning. We really need to instill that it's so important to develop the ecosystem starting from home. Like I said before, charity begins at home.
Thank you. Yes, and there was a direct question to you.
Actually, I would like to address
Go ahead.
what you raised about Senegal. I always say that private equities existed in Africa for a very long time. It unfortunately came in the form of credit. I don't know if you remember a company called Lonrho. What Lonrho did is essentially borrowed as a public company on the London market, lent it in Africa at 22%, and returned 8% equity returns on the London exchange. So pipe investment, public equity, in this case, public equity in private investment in Africa has existed for a long time. I think what we need is we need to change the way, the types of investments away from credit into equity and build an equity culture. The equity culture will then require local parties. Remember I was saying that we need to have local partners for investors to work with. That gives the local party an incentive to have an alignment of interests with the investing partner. That's the way you build. That's the way you build local capital as well, and that is what's going to build sustainable businesses into the future.
Thank you. Yes, 1 minute answer, please.
Yes, because of that,
could.
maybe I will focus on one element that is very telling. When you look at private investment in other regions, North America, almost $300 billion just for 2014, Europe 131, the rest of the world, including Africa, 16 billion of private investment. That shows the proportion of capital that is working just in 1 year. But for the moment, it's rather the putting together, bringing forward a real collaboration in terms of financial information. The investment without a proper financial information framework, whether we want to invest in a country because for let's say political reason, still investment requires a minimum level of profitability and security of investment. And therefore, it's important that financial information is made available at every level. And one of the very good result of the increasing footage of private equity is that it forces companies, whether small, medium, or larger, to restructure their governance, provide necessary information, and it fosters also innovation. We have in Africa now small businesses, small startups, which business is about developing tools to mobilize and structure information for those small businesses. You cannot expect this woman growing peanuts to be able to structure a financial information mobilization. And last year there was a South African, a couple of years ago, sorry, a South African startup that developed a software that help, and there are many initiatives of that kind to develop enabling tools, technologies to assist those small businesses. And another element, and that is, for example, what the bank is supporting in Morocco in agriculture, aggregation, helping small farmers to be together so that they can share information, invest in assistance to really structure their businesses and their value chains.
Thank you. I had a question, gentleman right there.
Yeah, my name is Elias, and I'm not from Nigeria, but from South Africa. And our problem is slightly different. We have a very developed economy. Our challenges at that level is more a matter of compliance. The big business, big finance corporations. Our problem is that we have such a lot of objectives by government to redistribute opportunities that we intervene to the point where we actually frustrate big business. And we have international businesses wanting to do the financing, wanting to do the involvement in South Africa, but because of the objectives, the political objectives of redistribution, we do find frustration. The old question of compliance, even at the lower levels, to be able to set up business, to be able to support business at that level becomes a very, very difficult task. So I think cross-border, yes, we also have private equity funds that go across border. I'm on a board of one called Business Partners that does quite a lot on the private sector, private equity funding. But I think our problems are slightly more political than it is the real financing and development.
Thank you. Question up front, please.
Jim Colby with the Transatlantic Fellow with the German Marshall Fund. Everything you were saying about the need for good governance and management skills, I think is absolutely correct. And I'm involved with a small socially responsible development fund in Central America. And what you were saying, particularly the two of you, about management skills, about good governance, about rule of law, protection of investors is exactly the same issues we face there. You got to get in and get dirty, your hands dirty with the management and get involved with that. So I'm just wondering, is there something that's really unique about Africa, or is it just that what we're saying is really applicable to any lesser developed country where we're talking about this kind of investment? It's just that so much of it we find in the continent of Africa.
Thank you. We're going to take just one last question because we only have 4 minutes left on the program. So actually a question right here in the back. Do ask your questions also on the app if you do, and we're keeping them, please.
Thank you. Rabia Mukhtar, Texas A&M and OCP Policy Center. Learning from the misuse of natural resources, natural capital in the West, in the South, in the North, and building on some of the earlier comments, how do we ensure that investments are inclusive of the environmental issues and preservation of the local, whatever that local? It's not only it's the human capital plus the resource capital that Africa has.
Thank you. I want the three of you to imagine you're in an elevator right now. You're going 10 floors up. That's all the time you have to answer these questions. I'm going to start with you, Ezana.
I want to address your question. Having worked extensively in Latin America, I will tell you that the issue that you raised is correct. The statement you made is correct. I think lesser developed countries have, if I want to distill it into one word, it has to be transparency, right? If you look at all global markets, it's all about transparency. Public companies, the disclosure rules are about transparency and equal dissemination of information. Likewise, in Africa, or be it in Latin America, in your case, Central America, it's the same issue. I want to use a global word because I think it applies. It's infrastructure, and infrastructure is part of building that whole ecosystem of be it regulation, be it investor protection rules, be it disclosure rules of financial information. But the whole system needs to get up. And that's what really drives it.
Thank you very much. Tokunboh.
I agree what you've just said. I think, yes, entrepreneurs in emerging economies face similar issues. I think, though, in Africa, one thing that we do and we allow the media to do is to pump up the political risks, all the risks of regulation. We're very good at highlighting that. We're not very good at highlighting the opportunity. And that's both locally for us to attract local investment even, and in terms of the way that we talk about the opportunity risks that are in our environment, that yes, the market is immature, ergo, that means that you can build businesses. There you have a population of 170 million. So what? What can you do with that raw talent? We're not very good at selling that story, and I think we need to do more of that. I think in doing that as well, part of doing that is that we do put our money where our mouth is, and we don't go out cap in hand looking for money elsewhere if we haven't made sure that we are investing in ourselves. It's like me buying a home, a nice home, and wanting it to be kept clean and luxurious inside, but I don't do that, and I'm expecting my neighbor to come and sort me out. It doesn't work that way. We have to put our money where our mouth is. Africa has to invest in Africa.
Could I just add one other quick thing?
You're off the elevator already. I mean,
the complexity of Africa is that it's 54 countries, right? Yeah. All with a different set of rules. What makes America, the United States, the amazing place that it is one language, pretty much one legal system. You do have state legal systems, but by and large, they follow one another to a great extent. There are certain differences, and people choose certain jurisdictions over others. But what makes it challenging and actually creates some of these issues of perception is that it's many different countries, different languages, different legal systems.
Thank you, Zana. Final word.
Definitely, there are two major opportunities. First, the ability to increase local contents on major infrastructure and agriculture projects that are going on the moment and that receive the main financing. For example, the project in Morocco, the local content has been one of the key elements that has been discussed with most of the stakeholders that have been involved. And also innovation, new opportunities created with the rise of green, sustainability conscious activities. And for example, we are from the financial side, there is the development of green finance capitalized on carbon capital that the continent is very rich of, to compensate the challenge that for the moment on climate change issues, most of the capital goes rather than to mitigation than adaptation. And therefore, we need to leverage and take these opportunities of taking forward this green finance that will be definitely very favorable to the continent.
Thank you, Yacine. And I want to thank the three of you for this wonderful session that we've had this morning on how to mobilize investments for Africa. And we've talked about it and we've mentioned it. It is a question of capacity. It is a question of training. It is a question of bringing talent to Africa, but also growing talent within Africa. And it's something that we're going to discuss right now in the next session. And you're all going to stay into the room because we're not going to have a coffee break, although you really, really want coffee. But we're going to jump right into a second session. And I'm going to introduce right now Linda Mandela, who's the Director of Stakeholder Relations at the Mandela Foundation. But please thank our panelists for this great discussion.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. Now, we live in a world where, or in a time where the world is scrambling for innovations on how to better itself. Now, investment in human capital is one of the ways in which we can actually elevate some of these conversations that we've been having all weekend. I'd like to introduce my panel who will actually be debunking and unpacking how we go about investing in human capital. Mr. Carlton Yearwood is a senior partner at True Blue Inclusion. Welcome, sir. Teocah, Youth, Gender and Community Development Consultant with the Teocah Legacy Foundation. Welcome to Teocah. Nayé is the leader in global parliamentary relations at the World Bank. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, over the weekend, we have been exposed to ideas, strategies, policies, interventions on how to achieve and advance, perhaps, security and prosperity in the African continent, particularly. Nayé, I'd like for you to speak on that.
Thank you, Linda. Indeed, we've discussed many of the development challenges over the weekend, from tackling climate change to the threat of global insecurity, terrorism, but also sharing prosperity, boosting agricultural productivity. How do we go about that? It is absolutely essential to, and I think we've talked about it during the previous session, to build the necessary skill set and invest in human capital. This is absolutely essential. And I will take Africa again as an example, because what is going to happen in Africa will shape what is happening in the world. Today, about 11 million people will be entering the job market every year in the African continent. This is the reality. How do we make sure that those people have the right skill set? How do we make sure that they are properly trained is absolutely crucial. We have about, when we look at the numbers, about 20% Africans only graduate in the areas of science and technology. The number is double in China or Korea. So what we need to do is to make sure that we go through the necessary reforms in our education systems, to make sure that those who enter the market feel included, those who enter the market have the dignity of having a job and meaningfully contributing to the development of our nations.
Thank you, Nayé. I want us to all think about what we mean by dignity, because it's a word that's been thrown around throughout the weekend. Is it perhaps a way of whitewashing our consciences in order to advance some of the things that we've spoken about, to say, listen, I'll give you this if you allow me to play into your space. But Carlton, I want you to define what human capital is in real terms.
Okay, well, let me start this way by saying that this whole issue of talent it needs to be acted upon by policymakers. The conversation amongst policymakers needs to be around talent needs to be elevated. We can't talk about security and prosperity and not talk about the importance of having a ready talent pipeline for employers. One only needs to take a look back at what some of the forward-thinking, enlightened companies in the U.S. Are doing. Most recently, Intel announcing a $300 million investment in talent to be spent over the next 5 years to ensure it has a market, a workforce ready to enter, representing both women and people of color. My experience is primarily working with corporations. Yeah. So I have this conversation with you from a corporate perspective, both from a national standpoint as well as a multinational standpoint. And I can share with you the fact that when we talk to senior leaders of corporations, of these corporations, the one thing that they share in common is the thing that keeps them up at night is their concern about not having talent, not having a workforce that's ready to assume the responsibilities. And we talk about it in terms of what is required to have a sustainable competitive advantage. And from that vantage point, we talk about you need capital, you need technology, and you need people. Two of those can be replicated, sometimes quickly, sometimes over a period of time. The idea of the people part of that equation stands out to suggest that if we don't make the right investment in our people, we can never have a sustainable competitive advantage. So it's important for us to look at what it is that we want the workforce to be able to produce, what are the tasks, skills associated with that, and are we making the right investments to ensure that, that's being realized. So the investment has to be one that ensures a ready workforce, and we have to have the patience and tenacity and be willing to have the courageous conversations that say, if we're not doing the right things, we need to correct the actions, because it's not going to allow us to have a sustainable competitive advantage over any period of time.
Now, I want to come to you, Teocah. I'd like for you to describe what are some of the impediments that are faced by the youth sector in terms of attracting that kind of investment. So when we talk talent, for me, to my mind, I equate it with youth somehow. I'd like for you to bring that up in terms of what stops or what could stop that transaction from taking place.
First of all, in order for us to invest in human capital, I made a note when I heard something. And I want to say there can be no investment or no true investment when it comes to youth if they are not empowered. You'll be wasting your time. And I will basically put my example, my foundation. When I started my foundation, I had to find a model of how do I invest in persons advanced, at-risk and vulnerable groups, but still in some way make it where I am donor independent. And this is a simple model that I will show you, investment and empowerment. I decided that I would use my two businesses and turn them into social enterprises. And what we do is basically, with my catering company, we hire at-risk and vulnerable women. And in doing so, we provide them with training, first of all. So they're working in a catering company. They get full-time training in being a patisserie chef. But besides that, following their training, they are then employed into the catering service. And from that, they are then able to have an income to see up after their families, but more so they now have certified training. In that model, profits from the catering company, after we have seen about staff and reinvested, then goes back into the foundation so that I can continue work in communities working with at-risk and vulnerable groups. And it's the same thing that I do with my other enterprise, which is coming on stream, but it's a farm. We work with at-risk and vulnerable young men, provide training, provide mentorship and empowerment. Once they're certified and they're fully trained, they then work in the farm, but more so they get an income, and also profits go back into the foundation to do more work in the community. If you build the capacity of someone, and that person is still broken inside, they're still facing issues inside of them from their past or present situations, then what you're doing is investing in a broken soul. And they're not going to be able to operate, they're not going to be able to work to their full capacity, because there are things inside of them that will be keeping them back. So it's important that when we speak about investment, especially in youth, especially with at-risk and vulnerable youth who may have faced certain challenges, that we also add a component of empowerment and mentorship, or else we will get nowhere no time soon.
Carlton, you're very impassioned about not investing in somebody who's broken, or you cannot invest in incompetence. I'd like for you to come in and speak to Teocah's point, particularly with some of the schisms that face the youth sector.
Yeah, and I applaud the effort and the results that you have, and your point is the right one. You cannot empower incompetence, and we talk about that a lot. And to understand what that means requires us to go what I refer to as below the civilized surface, to begin to have uncomfortable conversations about what is needed, what's required of our workforce. in order to surface the kinds of training, the kinds of development that is required in order for us to be successful. It's a tedious process. It requires patience, but it also produces results. And one of the things I've encountered when we deal with corporations is their lack of patience. They want it in bullet forms. Give it to me in 3 bullets. If you can't reduce it to 3 bullets, it's probably not something that I'm interested in talking about. So some companies fail as a result. Other companies who demonstrate the willingness and the patience to have these below the civilized surface conversations begin to bubble up new ideas, new ways to identify the kind of talent that they need, and then to put into place the kind of training and development that they need in order to be successful. For me, it's always about what are you trying to produce, what do you, how do you measure success, and what are the things that people need in order to ensure that those outcomes are achieved.
Okay. Now, let's talk to the existing leadership and the structures that are currently in the corridors of power in terms of allowing and creating this pipeline. How do we reach out to them in order for them to recognize that young people are a whole sector on their own who need proper investment in terms of bolstering their skills and their knowledge?
Thank you, Lindo. I've mentioned it earlier. I think it is essential to look at the quality of education. What we have, especially in Africa, again, we focused a lot, I mean, the Millennium Development Goals focused on increasing enrollment, but then we probably overlooked looking at the quality of the education and the necessity of the markets. Basically, today, people graduate, but the majority of those who are out there, the skills that they have acquired do not match with the needs of the needs of the societies they are operating in. And this is absolutely key. And when I look at the leadership, it mirrors a little bit that world. I work with elected officials. Today, we are quite welcoming the increased participation of different stakeholders and different parts of societies in the political arena. However, most of them are not equipped and do not have the necessary tools to meaningfully exercise oversight. For instance, you look at parliamentarians. Many of them in the continent are not literate, or when they are literate, they are poorly literate, so they are unable to formulate laws. How can we transform the continent if we cannot formulate laws? How can we transform the continent if we cannot properly read the budget? These are just simple steps we need to take, and we need to provide them with the necessary tools and equipment for that.
Okay, I'd like to bring it to the audience, and I'd like to, for you who are captains of industry, to answer the question, how do you create and how do you make that investment without creating a culture of indebtedness amongst the people whom you're trying to empower? There's been a few hands all around the room, so I'll start with you.
Thanks very much, Lindo. My name is Rolake Akinkwe. I'm an energy specialist. It's not specifically to address the question you've just posed out. I can talk to that. But there are 3 things which I wanted to raise, and I'm glad that you mentioned Nayé. I find one of the most shocking things is the quality of education and the fact that a lot of school curriculums are not being tailored to the specific needs of the economies which desire these skills. And whilst I think the STEM line, in terms of the curriculum, the science, the technology, and all of that is interesting, I think there's also a need to look at vocational and soft skills for a lot of young people who are coming out with very decent degrees on paper, but in terms of being able to apply themselves in the job market, I find that we face a limitation. The second point I wanted to make is I decided as a young woman, after 17 years of living abroad in the UK, to finally move back to Africa a year and a half ago to work and to contribute. But, you know, having cut my teeth in London and in other professional circles abroad, there were certain things I needed to really think about in terms of infrastructure, in terms of getting an attractive salary that was competitive and that might match what I was receiving. And I think those are areas perhaps governments and policymakers need to look at in terms of not just building homegrown or local talent, but also attracting the pools of diaspora who are abroad to come back home and work. Finally, and this is perhaps a very slightly controversial point, within Africa as a continent, the movement of skills from countries. I have a lot of friends who've worked in other African countries, and particularly one whom I wouldn't name, who faced difficulties in terms of getting work visas. I think we need a great deal more dialogue and openness between African governments, and especially where the issuance of visas and work permits are, to allow skills to move within African regions. I mean, we talk about the free movement of goods and services, but in terms of human capital, there are uneven patterns. The countries that have the need do not have the mechanisms that allow other professional Africans. Look at it within the EAC region, between Kenya and Tanzania, or between South Africa and Nigeria, which is often a good example. So I think those are the issues that we need to be open and frank about, and I think which will take us a long way down this road. Thank you.
Lindo, may I just speak to a little bit of what,
Carlton, and
what was said? Because I think it's an important point, but I think what we sometimes don't consider are the implications. And when I say implications, it's around corporate behavior. When a school or university is not producing the talent at the level that they would expect, they narrow their search. They narrow their search. And as a result, you have a growing, disenfranchised, underutilized workforce because they need the talent and they will go elsewhere to find it. And what we see, particularly in the tech industry in the U.S., they have 10 schools that they all want to recruit from because they've identified those 10 schools as the best schools for talent. What that has resulted in is underrepresentation in women, underrepresentation in people of color. So organizations like Intel, organizations like Apple are now finding themselves having to invest millions upon millions of dollars because that talent is drying up and they're going to have to spread their wings. So I think your point is an absolute right one, but what I think also we need to talk about in addition to that is what the implications of that will mean as we think about a ready and able workforce.
Thanks, Carlton. I'll go to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I want to agree with everything Rolake just said because it's I think there's a responsibility of the universities to come up with trainings and education that fits the company's needs. Now I have just 2 points. The first one is that personally I hate this term of human capital. Because human capital tends to be like, to compare the human resources, which is a less harmful, I would say, term, to money, to figures. It's like not that they are not unique. It's like they are just expandable. So this is the first point. The second point is that we talked about the governments and the education systems, I would say, responsibility, but there is also the companies and the private sector responsibility, not only providing, I would say, vocational training for their own needs, but for the all, I would say, ecosystems and country. And this is not something like, I would say, it's just for pro bono or like for good thoughts. It's really something that all companies can mutualize between themselves. I will just give 2 examples. From a Moroccan company that like 3 or 4 years ago launched the concept of talent factory. Okay, because we have the factory of goods, of different things, and they launched this concept of talent factory, which is we take the raw materials with like young graduates from universities and we train them to be leaders within the company or to take top management positions, but if they want to go out to serve in other, I'd say, companies or even public sector. The second example is about the ecosystems. We talked about them, especially on Friday when we talked about prosperity. And I think this is, I would say, a crucial notion. Why? Because thanks to the ecosystems, we can have this mutualization of trainings and vocational training and investment in human capital between mainly big companies, foreign or nationals, and small SMEs around them. And that can provide the right talents, and this is an investment not only for the companies that are creating value for their shareholders, but also creating value for the countries and themselves, and of course for the youngsters.
Thank you so much. I take on board your point about human capital as a phrase that sort of reduces human beings into things and makes them expandable. Now, I want to understand, is this maybe a transactional process? Am I investing in you because you've got something to give me? Is this a transaction, and should we be a little less emotional about this term?
Well, Lindo, while he's getting the microphone, and I appreciate you bringing that question up or that comment up. Lindo and I have been fighting over this for the past 2.5 days, and understanding the evolution of the term, personnel, human resources, and now human capital. It invited us to the table with the people who have access to the resources that we need in order to make a difference. So we began to talk more in the terms of the business in order to align ourselves and align our actions and activities around those things that the business values and that the business measures. So we joined in with IT investment, we joined in with other kinds of investments that the corporations were willing to make, and came away with the term human capital, because it is about the money and the investment and the time and attention that an organization pays when they find that these things are of critical importance.
Is it a transaction? Should we be a little less sentimental about this term? What are we talking about?
No, I think, let's be frank. It's an asset for a company, for a corporation. Yeah. When I grow my business and I hire somebody that I've been paying for years, it's an asset. It's part of the capital. So let's not play with the words. We're talking business when you recruit people. But I just want to share with you one example. I've been chairing the commission, and there's an organization in France called Cian that gathers all the big French companies investing in Africa. And we've conducted a study over 12 countries in Francophone Africa as a starting point. Basically, it was to assess the centers, the training centers, universities that train Africans as technicians, engineers in the right field. And out of 1,000 schools, universities, vocational training schools, we came up with 50 of them that were eligible in terms of they could train people that could be recruited in the market. 50 out of 1,000. So my point is that when you look at the African economies, let's take a country like Togo, small country, 6 million people, 57,000 square kilometers. Do you think this country can afford to have the best university for health system, the best one for energy, the best one for mechanical engineering, whatever? The answer is building regional centers of excellence. As she just mentioned it, we also need regional job markets. 2 examples. 2 years back in South Africa, you have 700,000 jobs available for 1 million people looking for jobs. In Egypt, before the crisis, 500,000 jobs available for 800,000 people looking for jobs. Complete inadequacy between what is being, like Nayé said, taught at school and what the market is requiring. So, let's put it that way. Imagine you have 100,000 mechanical engineers in Ivory Coast, but the markets cannot provide a job for those people. But you have those opportunities in Senegal, for instance, or in Togo. If you make the job market more flexible with free movement of people, and we mentioned that yesterday, then you start to regulate the market and make sure those people that have been trained don't become a waste. Because frankly, today you have probably 250 million to 300 million Africans on the job market, holding a master's degree, a PhD, but driving motorcycle as a taxi motorcycle, sure. Or being bodyguard or whatever. What a waste. So my question is, what's the plan for those 300 million people already there who have some skills, some assets, but are just wasting them by doing nothing? Or in the north of Mali, what happened? Just to end my comment.
Please, sir.
Those young people who graduate, and let me tell you, we've been recruiting Mali for years. And for one job, you have like 10,000 people applying. And out of these 10,000, you have like 5 to 10 people matching the position. People have been trained for years, and they cannot match the requirement of the market. So those guys in the north of Mali, you come to them and say, okay, guy, I'm giving you $100 and a gun. What do? You've been there for 10 years out of the job market.
Sure.
Holding a PhD. I take the gun and the $100. So this is a real issue. How do we make this job market becoming regional and regional centers of excellence? And the World Bank has a project. I'm sitting on the board of that project. We're building regional centers of excellence around the continent. I think those are the kind of initiatives we could look at.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to come to you, Teocah. What are some of the misgivings that you would like to deal with in terms of the youth sector and the investments that are being currently made in the youth sector? For example, what the gentleman is mentioning about $100 and a gun and versus sitting on top of a PhD for the past 5 years or so.
That is quite important. Something that can be looked at, and I don't want to go into it in much detail, the same thing that's happening that he explained was happening in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean governments look towards CSME, Caribbean Single Market and Economy, which allows free flow of skilled labor throughout the island. So that is something that can be looked into. However, training persons and not providing them. No, I should change that. Trinidad and Tobago has free education for all, right? And what we found was that a number of persons were doing degrees that were not applicable to the needs of the country. And as such, the government is now looking at ways in which you can direct which courses allow for free education, but more so direct and tell persons from the secondary school stage, and you find this a lot in secondary schools, where there is a need, and so you direct students into sciences, you direct students, instead of more of them going into languages and so forth. So I think there needs to be some direction. Yes, people have passion, but you have to look at the needs of the country and maybe direct your people to that specific need.
I'm worried. I'm worried about something. Time, number one. Secondly, I feel like we're amplifying the problem and we're not really defining the niche that we want to carve and speaking to the nuances of investing in human capital. Okay, I hear all of your bona fides. I hear your experience. I've got you. I'm listening. But I need for us to walk out of here with either the right questions to ask ourselves in terms of implementable things that in our direct area of influence we can go and plow.
Okay,
and I will. If I could.
I've noted your hands. I need microphones on the far end there.
And if I could, during that period, you have to ask yourself, investment in human capital, and I noted that yesterday, to what return? Yeah. What do you want when you invest in your workforce, in youth, in people? What return are you looking for? So that is something that needs to be set as a country agenda, more so, and along all lines. What are you investing in them for?
The gentleman said here it's business.
But you can't, and I find we have this sense of we're only thinking about, I need people so that my business can make money. But what about those people? What do those people want?
Okay. Let's take some more. Ching?
Thank you. I'm Song Ching from China and one of emerging leaders.
So I have two quick questions for Carlton. So question one is that we were talking about investment in Africa. Now we're talking about investment in human capitals. But to my limited observation, I find that the investment in Africa is intensively focused on two types of countries, those of rich resources and those of big population. And for those countries that like these two things, they are not enough taken care of. So from your point of view, how to solve this problem? And my question two is about China. So we were talking about China, and we have had a very good talk yesterday and the day before yesterday. So China's investment in Africa is often considered as neo-colonialism. It's kind of misperception, but it's also kind of, mutual mistrust. So from your point of view, how to avoid this or how to improve this? And let's talk about investment in human capitals. So what kind of role China could play in this term?
Carlton, could I ask you to hang 10 there? I'm going to take another question so that perhaps we could spread the questions evenly amongst our panelists. Please go ahead, ma'am. We'll come to you, and then we'll go right to the front after.
Hello, my name is Hibarisk. I'm from Morocco, and I'm also part of the Emerging Leaders Program. And concerning the idea that the training doesn't match the need, I think everybody pretty much agrees on this. But there is another dimension that I would like to bring to this discussion, is with all these new technological developments and new fields being created, and the pace that these fields are being created is much faster than the education systems that we have. By the time people start being trained to enter a certain field, that field has already filled the positions, and they don't maybe, and then they can't find a job. My question is should we be rethinking how we train people, how the education system is? It's an education system that we know has been evolving very slowly over a long period of time, and today, like Teocah's initiative with specialized training for people that is short term, that does not take 5 years or 10 years to reach that level, that certificate, so that you can enter the job force. Does everybody really need to spend 10 years in education to be able to work in different levels of workforce? Because not everybody needs to be the top manager. You need all sorts of.
We only have 10 minutes, and I'd like us to speak to issues of entrepreneurship and how we enable that particular sector. I'm going to go across the room to take one more question. I think that question is for you, Nayé. Let's hear from you, ma'am.
Good morning. I am Olenga Phillips from Sierra Leone. I work as Director Internal Audit in one of the largest commercial banks, and previously I was responsible for coordinating investments within the justice sector. My comments, which would end up in a question, would be, we've been looking at the future of prosperity, the future of security, investments in Africa and all that. But the key thing in all of this is investing in human capital. What are the plans for Africa or developing countries in terms of bringing up human capital to match up all this investment and all what we think the future holds for Africa? What plans do we have to overhaul the educational systems within developing countries, especially in Africa, to match up all these developments that we're talking about? What I see is challenges in the next 10, 15 years in terms of governments being positioned to partner with development partners. Because if we look at the quality of graduates that are coming out from universities within Africa, especially West Africa, to be more specific, Sierra Leone, what is going to happen in the next 10, 15 years is that top jobs would only be occupied by people who have the opportunity of schooling abroad.
Okay.
And then what would happen? All the investment will go down the drain because people locally will be there, and then when you give them things to do, they would not be able to perform.
Thank
and
you
also,
so much. I'm going to have to cut you short. I'm so sorry, we're running out of time. Entrepreneurship is something that we haven't spoken about in terms of investing in ourselves as young people. I'd like for you to tackle that, please, Teocah. We're going to start with your question, Carlton. We're going to move the mic that way so long. Carlton, Nayé, and Teocah, you speak to entrepreneurship and investing ourselves.
Okay, a couple of things. To the
You've
gentleman,
got 5 minutes.
Okay, to the gentleman that was talking about producing 100,000 mechanical engineers. If you're producing 100,000 mechanical engineers in an environment that requires petrochemical engineers, then you understand what problem you've created. So understanding what the needs, current needs, what the emerging needs of a region, of a company might be is critically important. So that requires some strategic planning. Getting to some of the solutions. In my view, Africa needs to find a way to identify transferable skills so that they can provide the right type of development for people to assume jobs that they may not have been educated in. So transferable skills to develop a workforce that is ready, I think is critically important. In a conversation that I had when I was in Johannesburg, you major in accounting so you can become an accounting manager. You major in engineering so you become a systems manager. And there are transferable skills that can allow those people to lead and manage across those disciplines. So I think Africa needs to work on ways to address that issue. This whole notion of, when I saw Cheng's hand go up, I was like, oh my God, I hope he's not going to ask me a question. It's motive. My view, I think people are always concerned about what China's motives are. And then when China tells people what their motives are, they don't trust the answer. So how do we begin to reconcile what the transparency which was talked about earlier today, so that we can get to a place where the answer is one that is believed, and the motives are those that are viewed as real. I think that's a critical conversation for us to continue to have. There needs to be a way to mobilize the workforce. China's experiencing it, moving people from rural areas into the cities, and I think Africa needs to find ways of identifying ways of of engaging a more mobile workforce. Critically important, and that goes to policymakers. What's the kind of infrastructure they are committed to ensure that those kinds of things happen. Understand that again, my experience is with corporations. Corporations take shortcuts because we look to get to the end result, obviously a lot quicker than policymakers do. So when people are educated outside of Africa and they can't find jobs inside of Africa, we look to cherry pick. We look to cherry pick those, so they'll never come back. So creating programs that would encourage their return, I think, is critically important. Corporations, we do that by tying their tenure to the investment that we make in, or their continued employment in the investment that we make in their continuing education. I think from a policymaker standpoint, you need to look at programs like that.
Thanks, Carlton. Nayé, and political will, education, overhauling the systems. A lot of young African people have had to learn a lot of soft skills, which is a good thing, but a lot miss the fundamentals that could make them okay, take them from okay to being great. That's a comment by Anonymous. Quickly, political will and overhauling the education system so that it is on par with what the market requires today.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to complement what has been said earlier.
We've got 2 minutes.
Yes, fine.
For everybody.
For everyone. Okay,
yeah,
that is okay. But I'd like to go back to entrepreneurship. I was recently in Peru. The majority of the youth is not looking for a formal job. And this is something also we need to look into in the continent.
That's the part I hope Teocah will
Yes,
will
but
tackle,
I'd like to tackle that quickly because that is essential for today's youth to understand that, yes, it is important to really build the right skill sets, but what is even more important is to be able to enter the job market independently, to be able, and that is something we really need to look into and to build that culture of entrepreneurship within the continent.
Nayé,
and
political will,
political will again is at the heart of what we have been discussing.
Yeah.
How do we make sure, and one aspect of political will is regional integration. It has been discussed earlier.
Okay.
Today, being a Togolese, South African, or Senegalese shouldn't make a difference because that is the case in Europe, that is the case in Asia, it should be the case in Africa as well. We should be able to move from one country to another, work in one country or another, learn from each other. And one other thing, talking about political will again, the role of the diaspora. How do we make sure that we bring back those people, those who have the necessary and the right skill sets back in the continent? It's being done, you know, this movement of repat is already happening in part of Nigeria, but we need to upscale it. It needs to get to a higher scale, but the infrastructure needs to be put in place. And for this, we need sound lawmaking, we need the right policies, we need policymakers to implement the right laws and make the right choices for that.
Yes or no? Do you think that Africa is in a position to define and determine for itself its own benchmark of what critical thinking is within the African context, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Teocah?
I think learning lessons, of course, lessons learned from my country. When it comes to entrepreneurship and to foster that entrepreneurial ecosystem, it must be a national policy decision. And I'll just give some examples. Understanding that need for entrepreneurship in our country, the government decided to do a number of vocational programs. So basically, it's a 6-month training program. You can train in any specific skill, but more so, once you're completed with that program, you get a CVQ qualification, which again, you can not only work in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the Caribbean with that. But what it also does, it provides those persons who have then graduated following that 6-month period with soft loans, easy to access loans that don't really need collateral, soft, small loans so that they can also start their own businesses. We've also seen business incubators where, again, there's the training, the mentorship, small funding, and a space within the IBIS program and those incubators. We've seen innovation programs where they encourage citizens to create products, create products and services that is different, new, and then fund that, not only locally, but help them in exporting the good that they have created. And then one agency that I used to work with, which is Youth Business Trinidad and Tobago, where they provide funding, small loans funding for young people to start businesses, but more so, there's a mentorship program for the first 2 years when you start your business to ensure the sustainability of that business. So I think in trying to foster a culture of entrepreneurship in specific countries, it must be a policy decision from a national policy decision so that there is support, because young people may have a business idea, but how are they going to take that from a dream, it's a reality, if there's not an environment of funding and mentorship to take them there?
To close things off, I'd like for you all to think about what's the thing that you're going to walk out of this very room and do as you step out. I'm going to take a few questions, 10 seconds each, please. Do we still have mics on the floor? Yes, I'll start with you. You've got a mic. 10 seconds, please.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
I think there's a major problem with the mismatch between education and what the education business is, right? There is a mismatch when it comes to the professionals that we are graduating from the schools. And I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But I think that the major issue is that people make decisions very early in their lives what will be their careers. So what we need the governments to do is constant retooling of the workforce. Now, if you have a PhD doing something else, he has to find a way through the government or through any private institution for retooling. And I think this is the best contribution that any government could do. Find out what the vocation is of the country, certain things that are going to, where it needs to be competitive, and retool the workforce. That's the only decision, I think, that's the best policy that should be applied. Constant retooling of the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm completely out of time. Sir, right in the front, you have had your hand up all morning.
Yeah, I think
10 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think you were, very right in terms of entrepreneurship and this being sponsored at a government level. Right now, what we see is it's civil society that is championing all these initiatives and programs. These initiatives and programs need to really come from the government level. How do we change the mindsets of Africans, to see themselves not as job seekers? They're training not to be job seekers, but actually to be entrepreneurs. How do we actually change the curriculum, to get them to become entrepreneurs, to go and give jobs, rather than depend on the job markets? Exactly. How do we get Africans to actually believe in themselves, that they can actually do it, they can actually grow their own businesses and actually employ people? We also need to sell our own stories. We need the media to sell stories of our own champions. And when the youth see these champions that are doing well, they are also encouraged not to be job seekers, but also to be entrepreneurs, because they see champions that are being propagated within the media and within the environment. So we need to change that mindset of Africans to be job givers, not job seekers, and to actually get the government to change the curriculum or include entrepreneurship in the curriculum and not just leave it to civil society.
Thank you. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. We're going to take another few people. I'm completely out of time. I'm so
on
sorry.
China,
I didn't manage to get to you.
I posted it, but I can say to you, China is moving 85 million jobs out of China because your wages are going up. Let's talk about how many of that 85 million is coming into Africa, what African governments have to do to provide an enabling environment to get at least 50% of those jobs, if not 100%. Now, to the issue I wanted to make, what I think is that the African state needs to recouple with its own local economy. Take the herdsmen in Nigeria, but they're herdsmen across Africa. And nobody is supporting them, nobody listens to them. There's people that do shea butter, there are people that do cassava. None of the states work with them. We can work with Shell, we can work with Chevron. I know you guys are doing a great job, but we need to listen to these people and grow them as Germany did. Germany set up a platform for private sector, government, and unions to work together to coordinate and build the economy. We need to do the same. We need to recouple with our local economy. Sure. We go for the big, but we have to grow our own to be big as well.
Sure. Thank you very much. We've got two quick ones, but I'm completely out of time. I've got to wrap this up. Thank you so much. What are you going to do walking out of this room, Carlton? 2 seconds.
Well, it's not so much what I'm going to do. It's what I would like for the people out here to do.
What is it?
And that is be willing to have these courageous conversations when you get back to wherever you are about what is critically important for achieving a sustainable competitive advantage that will ensure you security and provide prosperity for all of your
Thanks, Carlton. Nayé?
I would come back to three different elements. One is data. We need to know how many engineers do we need? How many cooks do we need? How many, that is essential. We need proper data. Data assessment is absolutely essential. One other thing is China. I will come back to China because what is happening today in Ethiopia In many parts of the world, we are building factories, and there is a big market for us in Africa, in the continent. Let's seize the moment. For me, it is about that, seizing the moment now, and bringing back women and the youth at the center of the conversation. Absolutely. It is absolutely essential. I will just finish with an African proverb, which says that when you educate a man, you educate an individual. But when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. So I'll just leave it to that.
There we go. Teocah?
I just want to add a simple statement. Youth at risk means society at risk. If you have 300,000, 400,000 in different states, young people who are not employed, and they become desperate, then they are at risk. And they're not just going to be it's not going to be a youth problem, it's going to be a national security problem, an international security problem, a healthcare problem. You're going to have a lot of issues. Young people need to be placed at the center of development decisions and national policy decisions in these respective countries, because what are you going to do if you think that you don't want to invest in competence? What are you going to do is you're going to leave the most vulnerable and at-risk group in your society, push them to the side, tell them, no, you're only dealing with the ones who can move forward and survive, and what you're going to have is a lot of national problems, international problems that you don't know how to deal with when they get too large. So deal with them in your country, put them at the center of your national development strategy.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all of you for being part of this riveting conversation.